Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And what exactly are you looking at? Well, this is the prediction tier list that I made for 11.0.5, holding myself accountable to you and myself to see how accurate was I even to predict the specializations and their power for that patch. And we're going to be moving these specializations around on where I'm anticipating them to be and landing on the changes that are coming in on the next reset, as there are significant buffs and significant nerfs there as well. So you'll have an idea of where you can track how your specialization is doing. The first specialization, Beast Mastery Hunter. I saw it just getting buff, and it was looking really, really good. So Bestial Wrath Hunter or Beast Mastery Hunters, definitely up here into the god tier. And I didn't anticipate the bug, but even without the bug and the bug being fixed, they were definitely still god tier. But they're probably getting nerfed. I would think, maybe the most heavy nerfs are being applied to Beastmaster Hunter. I think particularly Barbed Shot, as this is contributing like upwards of 20% of your overall damage. I think given the damage nerfs that are coming into Beastmaster Hunters, that they are likely to fall. Now, how far are they going to fall? That's a little bit more of a gamble. That's a little bit more difficult to predict. I'm expecting them to fall at least to S, if not A tier. So for now, I'm actually going to put them onto A tier. Going to take more of a bold prediction. I think they're going to fall quite heavily. I was already losing in lobbies against multiple Warlocks. Warlocks are receiving significant buffs. I think the caster meta is not going anywhere, and that's not particularly great for Beast Mastery Hunter. So I think it's likely going to fall quite significantly. Shadow Priest I put up into the god tier. I think that landed pretty much right on the money. And it is getting nerfed on its defense and its burst damage. Now, do I think it is enough to bring it down from god tier? See, this is still like really debatable for me, right? Like which ranged class is going to be taking over? Which one's going to be up here on the god tier? Is it still likely to be Shadow Priest? I'm kind of anticipating that it probably will still be Shadow Priest. Shadow Priest does comparable damage to Affliction, and I still think it's tankier even with the nerfs that are coming through. So I'm going to leave Shadow Priest here on the god tier for now. Elemental Shaman, the next spec that I think is receiving the most significant nerfs. I will say particularly your Earthshock damage is likely still going to remain high. So if you're banking a lot of Maelstrom and you're getting tons of big Earthshocks, you're probably still going to have some kill pressure within that window specifically. But Ascendance is receiving all of the significant nerfs coming into it. Also with my prediction, I think I was pretty spot on with this one. With Elemental Shaman, I'm a bit worried about it. I think that offensively losing your Ascendance is going to lose you a big kill window, although I think players were starting to adapt to the Ascendance. It was really like the proc Ascendances that were actually giving you kind of more of kill opportunities, but I do think Elemental will fall. I think its defense is still really solid. But I definitely think it's going to fall at least a little bit. So do I think it's going to fall to S or A? Because I still think it's definitely above B, just mostly because of its defense. I'm also going to put Elemental under the A tier for now, in terms of its migration from God tier. Feral Druid, it's receiving some nerfs towards its incarnation, as well as its defense and its mobility through King of the Jungle PvP talent. I think those are the correct abilities to nerf. They're not getting nerfed, though, as much as other specializations in particular, but I do think there's other melee that could be, sleeping just below the surface. But for now, I think that Feral Druid is likely to still remain on the god tier. I think a lot of people have also just re-rolled, committed to it, put a lot of time into it, and the nerfs aren't enough really, I think, to sway them into something else necessarily. So I think that the population will still stay high, and it will still be in a very strong position. Holy Paladin, on the other hand, I don't expect to stay in god tier. Holy Paladin is receiving probably the largest nerfs of any single healer. Both hero talent tree selections, your melee wings, you're getting some damage buffs in exchange for this, which is nice, but I think the loss on Word of Glory and the Eternal Flame, the double dip there, is likely going to pull you down. Now, how far is it going to pull you down? I think you're really susceptible to crowd control still, one of the easiest healers to CC. And with the throughput loss, I think you're at least falling down to S. Maybe further, but I'm going to leave it here just because I'm not 100%. Again, this is predictions on where I'm expecting the specs to land, but we'll leave it here on S for now. Affliction Warlock, I don't think we're seeing it go anywhere. We didn't see any real significant changes for it, and it was just still really in a solid spot. Devastation Evoker is the same. Subtlety Rogue, though, is a specialization that a lot of people are starting to figure out stuff on this. I'm starting to see like 5 mil plus Eviscerate crits, and it didn't receive any attention whatsoever as far as nerfs, and a lot of people, myself included, were worried about where it would land. My prediction to put it onto S tier was, seemingly a bit random. But it ended up being really good still, I think. It ended up being really good. I think Subtlety Rogue is actually going to be popping up on the God tier a little bit here. Maybe not, though, because Demonology is getting stronger. I think if Demonology is strong, then Subtlety gets weaker. I'll leave it on S tier for now. Assassination Rogue, you're getting like a very small nerf. I don't think it's enough to really sway you in terms of moving you as far as a huge position. So I'm going to leave Assassination Rogue here on S tier for now. Windwalker Monk, pretty much the same, just a really solid melee DPS at the moment, really tanky, hard to kill. We already assessed Paladin. Discipline Priest, I think you guys are going up in a god tier. Discipline Priest is getting really big buffs. Now, some of your hero towns are getting nerfed, but your baseline abilities are getting buffed, and I think that's definitely going to help you out a lot in terms of overall power. And Mistweaver Monk, I'm also putting up in the god tier. This is like very atypical. I'm putting 2 healers up here onto the god tier, but I think Fistweaver builds are definitely going to start popping up again. You can be a ranged Fistweaver now. It's quite wild, and the increases to your overall throughput, I think, are remarkable at the moment, especially with the Crackling Jade Lightning. Definitely like one of the easiest, most improved specializations in terms of power right now. Preservation Evoker, a bit of a hard one. Actually, I feel it's not as good as it was. So I kind of want to drop it a little bit, but I think we'll leave it on S tier for now. Again, I'm thinking mostly shuffle when I'm considering this tier list, but I think we'll leave this where it is. Frost Mage onto the A tier. Frost Mage, honestly, the A tier might have been a bit low for it, but considering the specs that were good, like Ellie Shaman and Feral Druids and things like that, I was thinking that Frost Mage would kind of struggle in that meta, and I think that assessment was correct initially with my prediction here onto the A tier. But with the changes that are coming through, depending on if they do the bug fixes, I think it's probably still likely to remain on A, given that Feral Druids are still going to be really good. Although I don't know, my experience yesterday, even with the current classes, I think I got a lobby within Rookie, and it was like maybe it was a double Warlock Shadow Priest. There was no Ellie. Maybe if there's an Ellie, it wouldn't have been as easy, but it didn't seem that weak. I'm jumping this up to the S tier. I think I'm jumping Frost Mage up to the S tier. Beastmaster Ellie, we already covered. Marksman, honestly, I think Marksmanship Hunter is pretty low at the moment in terms of ranking. It's getting nerfed really hard, so I'm bumping this one down to B tier. I think its offense is getting weaker and weaker every time the changes come through, and it's I don't know if it's just the removal of the aim shot talent on the hero talents, but it feels a lot weaker now. Survival Hunter, I think, is still in a solid position at A, just really well rounded, decent output, great specialization to go after. Outlaw Rogue, very similarly, I think that it's still decent. A little bit less threatening than Subtlety or Assassination, which is the main reason I'm holding it down here on A, but you definitely still make it work. Enhancement Shaman, honestly, my prediction for this should have maybe been a bit higher. I could have honestly put it on S tier. Apparently some builds are coming through. Voltaic Blaze with 2.5 million Flame Shocks, and also the Doomwit Stormstrike build was really good with the Ascendants. The animations are sick on it, so honestly I think I was a bit wrong on the prediction for this one. It could be a bit higher. After the changes that come through for it, though, I think it's going to stay where it ended up being here for this prediction. Unholy DK, I'm actually going to take this down a rank. I think it's actually worse than I was giving it credit for. I think that its single target pressure is just basically non-existent, and it's kind of pad damage is just not felt at all by the amount of healing that's available in the game. So we're going to drop this one down to B tier for now. Ret Paladin on A tier I think was solid as far as prediction, and I think it's likely still going to remain on A tier. Just decent overall, has big damage at the moment, well-rounded kit. Fury Warrior, you're getting some buffs. I had you on A tier. You're probably still going to be on A tier. I think that you still do get kited quite heavily by things like Devastation and Hunters and Frost Mages and of the like. I still think that you're pretty easy to kill as well, even given the damage buffs that are coming through. They're not going to help your survivability much, so I think A tier is still a good spot for you. Resto Shaman could be getting better. Main problem for Resto Shaman is that some of your hero town trees like that have the most throughput, like Totemic, require your teammates to stand in things, and we all know how well that goes in PvP. And the only things people stand in through the dawn of time of WoW is fire from dragons, and that's it. That's all they stand in. They'll never stand in your healing rain. So you have to play Farseer, and the healing output's a little low. Now, the casted spell buff, maybe it's enough. Maybe we could bump it up, but I'm going to leave it on A tier for now. Resto Druid, I put it on to A tier with the reworks that were coming through to it. It's feeling better, but when I watch Resto Druid, it still doesn't seem like that great. So I'm actually going to drop Resto Druid, I think, this time around, down onto B tier. I think that it's likely going to be a little bit weaker felt overall, especially because these other healers are going to just start shining so much more than you particularly. Arcane Mage, I don't think Arcane is getting anything in particular, but maybe it's a bit better than B. I think it struggles with the Hunters and the Ellies and the Ferals and all this other like current meta stuff. But if Warriors become more meta, it could definitely rise. I think I'm going to leave it on B for now. Boomkin, I think it's still B tier. I think it's survivability with my prediction at least, right? So my prediction for Arcane, I think, ended up being pretty good. Mind you, they did like last minute changes as well. I think after I made the tier list, which put it down a little bit lower than that I can't really take credit for, but I think it's still likely going to be on B tier for Tuesday. Boomkin, survivability is getting a little bit of an increase. I think particularly the Frenzied Regen, but our Star Surge is getting shaved off a little bit of damage. The rest of the damage changes don't really matter that much. It could jump up to A. It could jump up to A depending on how much Frenzied Regeneration heals. I do think the lethality of the spec is definitely warranting of moving it up to A. Even with the changes coming through. So I'm going to bump it up to A tier for now from B with those Frenzied Regen buffs that are coming through. The Rejuve buff, not going to really do much. Destro Lock could be really good. You get a lot of single target damage buffs, and it was already kind of clocking people. Now, defense is a bit weak, but I think the single target pressure is likely going to be pretty remarkable. So I could see Destro Lock kind of rising up through the ranks as a result of the buff. So I'm gonna bump it up a tier. Demonology, I fully expect to jump up into the S tier. It was already looking like somewhat decent, and the amount of numbers that are getting buffed on Demo Lock are quite wild. And I think that Demo Lock getting buffed that much could have big ramifications towards the rest of the meta, because usually when Demo's strong, rogues start to suffer even without really nerfing them at all. So Demo Lock, I think, is going to be really good. This is a bold prediction. This is my first like really bold prediction for the patch, is that Demo is going to be insanely good. Demon Hunter, I think B tier is still a solid spot. Just kind of low damage output, not great survivability. Kind of get kited pretty hard by some of the Frost Mage, Ellie Shaman stuff. Could be difficult to connect. Not really great patch. Didn't get any attention at all. We already moved Unholy Arresto. Arms Warrior, the damage buffs are significant, but your defense is still limited. I think the significance of the damage buffs, though, is likely to make you feel a lot better. So I'm going to bump you guys up onto A tier, but I do think defense is probably holding it back from what's going to be onto S tier for the time being. Frost Death Knight, you guys are still probably here. You didn't really get a lot of attention. You're still kind of at the bottom. Holy Priest, they didn't really target like a huge amount with you. It was just kind of like Palm, I think, and maybe Renew, like a minor buff. I don't know if it's enough to really move the meter too much for you relative to something like Disc and Mistweaver that got like they were already ahead of you and they got so much more than you did. So the gap between you and them just got bigger, even though like you got a little bit, but they got a lot. So they're just even further ahead. I'm probably going to leave Holy Priest here. Fire Mage, I think, is still likely here at the bottom. Its survivability is just really low still. And the damage doesn't warrant how low its survivability is. Seeing like more damage increases to fire, I think, would likely need to be made to justify its squishiness. An Augmentation Evoker, kind of sleeper, but I still kind of expect it to be kind of towards the lower end. I just don't see it a lot. But it does have like a crazy one-shot, can make the team decently tanky. Maybe it'll be better now if Warriors are more viable, if we move towards more of a melee DPS meta. I would just say that we're not really in a melee DPS meta, and Augmentation kind of sucks with multiple casters and solo shuffle. As far as tanks go, all of these tanks could be really broken and overpowered. I'm just going to say that right now. Nobody is really trying them, and they just most of them keep getting buffed. Every single patch, their damage gets buffed. So if you wanted to be that guy and re-roll into a tank to try and one-shot some people, yeah, I think that you could definitely have some opportunities with the changes that have come through for damage output from the tank spec so far and from what I've seen. But this is kind of my assessment as we've moved the specializations around. Wanted to keep this up to date. I know you guys, it's been like 24 hours or something like that. I haven't made a tier list, so just wanted to make sure that you guys could see what I'm thinking here as far as specializations and kind of where I see the shift in terms of their overall power moving into the class changes that are happening on Tuesday. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to smash the subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, and I will see you in the next one.